Okay, we have had a ridiculous amount of requests for us to go through and make this video, and it's because we've been profitable every single week that we have done this so far this season. I mean, this is week 5 now. Now, if you don't know, essentially what we did this year is we decided we're going to have a $1,000 bankroll challenge. I mean, I'm not trying to pretend out here like we are going to be profitable over the entire season, year after year after year. But I'm going to be very transparent with all our results. And as of now, our results are fantastic. I'm going to show you all of that before we jump into the picks this week. But of course, you know, I have to give a shout out to Underdog Fantasy. We have to give that shout out that we are going to be going through and we are going to be looking at their player props right here. This is my favorite place to do pretty much anything player prop related, or also just going through, and even they're doing some fantasy football drafts halfway through the season. So make sure y'all go use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. You can check out all these player props. You can also hop into a draft, and when you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy, you get a max deposit bonus. You also support this channel more than you would ever believe, and you get daily additional entries to win a Fantasy Flock Network hat. Let me grab that real quick. If you want to look like a stud, this is the way you do it right here. We're not going to wear that. The hair's wet. But anyway, let's go through, and I'm not going to do the math. Honestly, I'm running a little short on time here. I'm not going to do the math of the results, but I will share the screen just so y'all can go through. And this is the unedited. These are even the bets that I've made off of the live stream. We're going to include them in here just because I want to be completely transparent, whether we're winning off or on the live stream. Let's go through and show it. Okay, so now let's just continue to scroll this up so everybody can pause it. They can do the math on their own. Like I said, you're going to see a lot of red here. Like, notice that what we do is we go through and we make a lot of these bets. Usually we try to get 3 or 4 picks in there, knowing that we really only have to hit 1 if we are going to be profitable. So let's continue to go through, show this, yada, yada, yada. I mean, get some big bets in here. We won 500, those 3 bets. 120, 204. I mean, this past week was just fantastic for us. 200, 120. We have some great tickets on here. And yeah, we're going to go through and try to accomplish the same thing. We have some strategies we can go through and show y'all at the same time. And let me pull up the pick'em lines. And one thing I want to discuss is the fact that with these pick'em lines, they continue to add lines all the way up until Sunday kickoff. That's why, I mean, it kind of took us a while to get to this video because I wanted to really have as many lines as possible that we are going to be looking at. Now, keep in mind, these lines may now be a little bit more efficient, knowing that, I mean, there has been a lot of money bet on these lines, and the lines have moved slightly based on where that money's come in. So let's go through, and what I'm going to do is maybe not necessarily make any official bets while we are going through this initially. You know what I realized? I think Safari's been bugging out on me a little bit lately. We may have to switch this over to Google Chrome. Hopefully we have no issues. Let me go through and get a test bet out right now. And when we have Elijah Moore looking like he is going to be good to go in this game between the New York Jets and the Atlanta Falcons, I actually think that you could potentially see this overall game being a little lower scoring than a lot of people are going to assume. I mean, this under on Matt Ryan, 274 passing yards, I think that this is a smash. So knowing that we're going to be betting the under here, I think what we want to also do is just go through and say, well, if this under is going to hit, you'd imagine that the New York Jets aren't going to be scoring that many points either. So we're going to go through, maybe we have to switch over to Google Chrome to get this working, but let's see if this is going to be good. Okay, no, this is good to go. Okay, so we made this first bet with $25 here, taking the under on Matt Ryan, Zach Wilson, and Corey Davis. This Corey Davis under, I think, is a little bit iffy. I think the main reason we're going to take this is knowing that we are going to get Elijah Moore into this situation, which possibly makes this overall target share a little more spread out because Jamison Crowder did look like he had that large role this past week. Maybe the under on Jamison Crowder is a little bit better than the under on Corey Davis. Now let's go through and look at the next game that we're going to have between the Houston Texans and the New England Patriots. Now, Davis Mills, they have this line back up. They took this down a little bit last night, 186 passing yards. Now, we discussed this past night. I actually think it was maybe 178 or 183 last night. It was like one of the lowest lines I had ever seen, if not the lowest line I'd ever seen for passing yards, regardless of whatever website you're looking at. Now, with that being said, I can't come out here and say we're taking the over, knowing that he is going up against the New England Patriots, knowing that he just laid a complete goose egg against the Buffalo Bills. And we said before he took over as the starting quarterback for the Houston Texans, before he played a snap, that he would be the worst starting quarterback in the NFL. So now if we're going to go through and look at this game, I mean, Damian Harris here, a very aggressive mark of 70 rushing yards, but you'd imagine that the New England Patriots lead this game by a considerable amount. So I don't necessarily think we can go through and even bet this side right now. Also, it looks like Phillip Lindsay's potentially going to be missing. So maybe that's why you're getting the bump up here for David Johnson. This entire game is going to be a stay away for us. And keep in mind what we're doing here. We're going game by game. With that first bet, what we tried to accomplish is trying to get correlation in our ticket slips. When we took the under on someone like Zach Wilson, it's more likely that if that Zach Wilson under hits, then so will the under for Corey Davis. So that's how we're trying to cheat the system here. That's how we are trying to go through and have the just maximum chance of just printing on some of these tickets. Like I said, if we're going to make 5 bets here, we only need 1 to hit to be profitable. That's our strategy throughout this entire thing, is get a lot of bets down, get the correlation in each ticket slip that we're submitting. That way only 1 has to hit and we can have that profitable week like we just showed y'all at the beginning of the live stream. Done very well with that strategy. Now here I will say that if you're going to be looking at this game between the Miami Dolphins and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I really wish we had an official report on what we are going to get from Devontae Parker here, because if Parker misses this game, Jalen Waddle is a smash for the over. I mean, Jalen Waddle, you would assume at 54.5 receiving yards, it would be a no-brainer to take him there. Now, also, I mean, just if you're going to look at this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, this Buccaneers defense is pretty damn good, but it's all centered around their run defense, where we know that their defensive backs, I mean, that's a position that's extremely thin right now. So, I mean, you would imagine that these wide receivers for the Miami Dolphins would be able to take advantage. Now, personally, I'm going to be a little too scared to go through and take that bet, knowing that, I mean, Jacoby Brissett is near the very bottom of the NFL in adjusted yards per pass attempt. So personally, I'm probably going to be looking to avoid this entire game, if we're going to be honest. Now, going to our next game, we're going to have the Philadelphia Eagles here playing the Carolina Panthers. And y'all know my guy, love him to death here with DJ Moore. I mean, this is someone that we ranked as a top 5 wide receiver last week in fantasy football, knowing that it was a matchup where you should see a lot of points scored between the Dallas Cowboys and the Carolina Panthers. No Christian McCaffrey. You were getting a bump up with the projected target share for DJ Moore. Now, with that being said, it's really hard to go through and see this game being that high scoring. I think personally, we're going to go through and possibly take the unders here on this game. I think that this game could be a letdown for 2 teams that had good matchups against defenses this past week. I mean, I think now you're going to see this Carolina team actually being built around the defensive side of the ball, even though you saw Dallas putting up a considerable amount of points this past week. Remember what we saw, I mean, so far this season. I know they played some pretty bad teams, but they also shut down the New Orleans Saints in week 2. So here I think that we're going to just continue to go through. We're going to identify this line as DJ Moore. This is the same exact receiving yards they have for Davante Adams here. We're going to be taking the under, as this is a very aggressive mark, knowing that if here DJ Moore hits the under, what is also likely to happen in this game, I would assume that that's also meaning that Sam Darnold is a pretty good lock for the under. Now, Jalen Hurts has been smashing this line every single week. Like, if you've been betting the over on Jalen Hurts here, you have been just printing money so far this season. So instead of betting the under on Jalen Hurts, I think this may be a better spot to go through and look at the under on another player on the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, if we're going to be looking at a couple guys, I think here one interesting call would be Dallas Goddard, who's only been averaging 4 targets per game so far this season. Now, yes, with Dallas Goddard, this is someone who has a ton of talent. He's been very efficient on a per target basis at the same time. But I mean, let me pull up the game log we've had from Dallas Goddard so far. Usually, I mean, how these lines are generated, at least how I'm assuming they're generated. Obviously, I don't have a sneak peek behind Underdog or anything, but if you just look at game logs, kind of it looks like they're just taking almost the average or the median of their performances so far this year. They're putting out the lines that way. I'm assuming that they also take into account some kind of matchups here. But if we're going to be looking at this line for Dallas Goddard, I actually am glad we pulled up this game log, because even though he's only averaged 4 targets per game, he has hit this mark 3 out of 4 weeks so far, where he's had 42 receiving yards, 66 receiving yards, 56 receiving yards. So honestly, I think that maybe this is a line that you can take the over with. Thank God we pulled this up. Let me check out Devontae Smith so far with what we've had. Keep in mind, 1 week he did end up going up against Trayvon Diggs. I will point that out whenever we pull this up I don't necessarily think there's anybody in Philadelphia that's going to be as much of a matchup problem as Diggs was for Devontae Smith. Also, he did have a disappointing week against the 49ers here. So with Devontae Smith, he's had 71 receiving yards week 1, 122 this past week against the Kansas City Chiefs. Against the 49ers, he had 16, and then he also had 28 against Diggs and the Dallas Cowboys. So like I said, I mean, usually you're going to see this number like 63.5. That's right in the middle of what you've had so far this year. I think if we are betting that these two unders are going to hit, we are just going to have to naturally assume that this game is going to be lower scoring than people are projecting right now. So whenever we go to look to take a side on this, maybe we just have to go through, we have to pick an under. So even if I'm not in love with this Devontae Smith style, I just think that if we're trying to build in correlation into this ticket, that will be a good spot to go with. So let's go through and let's bet $20 on this bet, $20 to win $120. Now let's go to our next game, which will be the Tennessee Titans as well as the Jacksonville Jaguars. It looks like they have slightly bumped up the overall receiving yards for A.J. Brown, if I'm remembering correctly from last night. Now, if you're going to be looking at this, I mean, this is a pretty aggressive mark for Ryan Tannehill. Like, I would definitely be more interested in the under for Tannehill here, the over for A.J. Brown, just knowing that this overall Tennessee Titans offense doesn't have the weapons outside of A.J. Brown this week for Tannehill to really hit this mark without A.J. Brown doing so. So I will say the last thing you could ever do is take the over on Tannehill and the under on A.J. Brown, because if the over hits on Tannehill, you're damn sure that that over is also hitting on A.J. Brown. Now, that being said, I'm not a massive fan of this Tannehill line, and we can kind of say the same thing here with Trevor Lawrence. Now, they also moved this Laviska Shenault line up. I mean, this is something that opened up the week at like 220 passing yards. That's why y'all definitely have to be looking at these underdog lines as soon as they come out. I mean, we're definitely going to be looking at those in every live stream that we do on our fantasy football channel. I just want to make sure that we can wait as long as possible to make this live stream here with our official bets, just knowing that there are going to be additional lines for us to look at. Now, if we're going to go through and look at this, I think possibly this could be a spot to take the under, but the problem is, like, if I want to take the under on Tannehill here, take the under on Lawrence, where else can we take the under? Like, underdog's not going to allow us to take two unders on the same player. I mean, if that was the case, obviously you could just print money here, but the underdog is in the business of making money, not being a charity, so it's going to be a lot harder for us. We would have to pick another player we want to take the under for in this matchup. I don't want to be taking that under on A.J. Brown. I mean, even if Tannehill hits this under here, I could easily see A.J. Brown going for 70 receiving yards. Very similar with Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault now that you have DJ Chark here good to go. So if this line for Lawrence was still 230, I would really like to go the over on Lawrence, take the over on probably Marvin Jones and A.J. Brown here. The problem is with this line being 248 for Trevor Lawrence, I think this is probably going to be a stay away for us. Maybe we'll go back to this. Let me go through and drop a heart on what we're getting with Marvin Jones, A.J. Brown, potentially taking the overs here. But let's see if we have any other bets that we would potentially like a little bit more. Now, our next one will be the Denver Broncos and the Pittsburgh Steelers, where, I mean, here it looks like this Tim Patrick line, you know we would be taking the under here if we knew 100% sure that Courtland Sutton was going to play this game, but with Sutton rolling that ankle in practice yesterday where it's kind of up in the air on what exactly we're going to have for him, I'm probably going to be looking to avoid this situation. Javonte Williams, this is a really interesting spot to take the under on Javonte Williams here. Just looking at Javonte saying, well, you know, this can be a situation where he does come out and he splits his backfield with Melvin Gordon in a low-scoring game against a good Pittsburgh Steelers defense. And if this was total yards, I think we would take the over. But if it's just rushing yards and rushing yards only, I think the under is a pretty good spot. This will probably be a stay away for us. Maybe we come back to this one, but let's see if there's anything else we like a little bit more. Now, our next one will be the Detroit Lions playing the Minnesota Vikings here, where they have some pretty aggressive lines on a couple of these players. Hawkinson, we don't even know if TJ Hawkinson's going to be good to go. So if you bet on a player, like if we took the under here on TJ Hawkinson and he was inactive on Sunday, underdog just treats that as a wash. Like if you go through our history of our tickets, I can actually show this really quickly because we actually showed those histories at the beginning of the live stream. But I just want to show y'all because this was something that I didn't know what underdog was going to do with, and I was a little bit concerned at the beginning of the year, but I was very happy to see the results in it. Like you see this line here, you see this little white dot for Odell Beckham Jr. This was a game that Odell Beckham Jr. was looking like he was going to play, and that he was a surprise inactive on Sunday morning after I made the bet. So they just go through and they just remove Odell Beckham Jr. for the bet. The overall ticket is still active. That's why you saw that it says 3 picks for 120, and we actually only ended up winning 60. It's because Odell didn't go his over. Instead, he didn't play, so they just removed him here. So it was actually 2 bets for $60 rather than 3 bets for 120. So if we were to bet on TJ Hawkinson here, this would be a spot that if he does miss, we end up just having that bet washed, not necessarily getting the exact W. Or of course you would go through and you would try to find as many of those game time decision players as possible, and you would just be taking the under every single time. But here, if we're going to be looking at this, I think this could be a very, very interesting spot to maybe bet the under on Hawkinson, the under on Jared Goff, saying, well, if Hawkinson is 50%, I mean, then this will be a situation that you know that he's probably not going to get his usual volume, and this overall offense isn't going to be as productive, knowing how important TJ Hawkinson is for it. So we're going to take some more unders here. Y'all have noticed I haven't taken a single over so far this video. I mean, I've found a lot more success in going through and identifying some of these unders. I think we're also going to be taking the under on Justin Jefferson here at 86.5 receiving yards. Just like we said, I mean, the thesis here is maybe you get the Minnesota Vikings being able to run the ball consistently over and over again with Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison in this game. If Hawkinson does miss or he's 50% in this Detroit Lions offense, can't necessarily go through and put up points. So we're going to go bet $25 on this to win 150. Like I said, this is a low probability bet, but as we showed our results, you don't have to hit every single bet. You just have to make sure you're hitting the right amount with the odds that we are getting. So now our next bet will be the Green Bay Packers here, where this is now a spot where I think we can start taking some overs. Like, notice we just bet the under on Jared Goff at 262.5 passing yards. Aaron Rodgers is 4 passing yards off of that. Hell yes, we're going Aaron Rodgers here. We're going to be betting the over on Rodgers and Davante Adams. We actually took the under on DJ Moore with this pretty much exact same stat line. Now, going through and trying to identify an over that we can take here, now that we have T. Higgins playing in this game, I would be very scared to go through and pick any of these wide receivers to take an over with. But when we take the over on Adams and Rodgers here, we're essentially betting that this game's going to be higher scoring than a lot of people are projecting. So instead of taking the over on any one of these wide receivers, I think we do need to take the over on Joe Burrow himself, assuming that possibly we just have this as a spot where it turns into a little bit of a shootout, knowing that the Cincinnati Bengals have preferred to run the ball as of late, but they've been going up against bad teams. It's probably not going to be possible against the Green Bay Packers here. So this is going to be our first over ticket. We're taking the over on these 3 players. We're going to be betting 25 to win 150. Now let's go down with our next game. This will be the New Orleans Saints. And with New Orleans, I just have no idea what the hell to expect. Obviously, they're not letting Jameis Winston throw the ball. I mean, I don't think Winston's hit 212 passing yards any given game. But a big thing is, I don't like going through and betting on these games where we don't have a lot of options. There is some injury uncertainty here with what you're going to be getting for both of these teams right now. That's why you're seeing a couple of these lines skewed. I think Terry McLaurin's over here is almost guaranteed, though, because you're looking at it while it's saying, yes, it's a tough matchup. At the same time, they have no Curtis Samuel. They have no Diami Brown. They have no Logan Thomas. It's really just Terry McLaurin, Adam Humphries, and Curtis Samuel. So maybe what we do is we just use this Terry McLaurin and Adam. You know what? I say we just try to make a bet that this game turns into what you had this past week against the New York Giants. I know this is a little bit bold, but I think we're going to be betting the over on all of these options here. I know it's very low probability, but I think the over on Terry McLaurin and Adam Humphries, these are the main pieces we're trying to get in with no Logan Thomas and with no Diami Brown here. So I think if we're really liking both of these lines, these are more so just correlation, because, I mean, if both Terry McLaurin and Adam Humphries hit the over, these are the bets I'm wanting to get in. What is more likely than not to also happen in that instance? It's more likely than not that you also have Taylor Heineke hitting his over. More likely than not that Jameis Winston hits his over at the same time, even though, let me pull up the stats that we've had from Winston, because I don't think Winston's come close to these numbers so far this season. I mean, if you're looking at Jameis Winston, this is someone that has had, I mean, he had 226 yards this past week, 128 the week before that, 111 the week before that. You actually had 148 before that. So maybe we're taking the over on Alvin Kamara here instead. I mean, if you're going to be looking at Kamara, I know he didn't really get targeted out of this backfield this past week, but still from a yardage standpoint, he did beat his over prop, where, I mean, so far it looks like Alvin Kamara's really had only 2 weeks where he's hit this over, but this New Orleans team is just so damn hard to pick. I think we're going to take the over on Kamara instead of the over on Winston. I don't want to be taking the over on both. The main reason I'm making this bet at all is just because I love this Terry McLaurin and this Adam Humphries line, and we just have to try to find some correlation in here elsewhere. So we're not going to be making an extremely aggressive bet here, knowing that I'm not in love with the Alvin Kamara or the Taylor Heineke line. That's not why we're making this bet. We're making the bet because of McLaurin and Humphries, and we're trying to fill out the ticket. So we're going to be keeping this one a little bit lower stakes. We're going to only be betting $10 on this one to win 100. It's just because I'm not a massive fan of that. Now our next game here will be Chicago playing the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, looks like they have a ton of lines out here, and just like we were taking the Chuba Hubbard unders this past week, we're taking the under on Damian Williams here at 84 total yards. Essentially, I think this could be a spot just like we said with Chuba Hubbard. While, yes, he projects to come through and be the lead running back in this backfield, we don't necessarily know exactly what that role is going to look like. I don't think we can say with certainty that he is going to come out and all of a sudden just be David Montgomery himself. So we're going to take the under here, and we're essentially going to be making the bet that this overall offense for the Chicago Bears isn't as productive as what we got from this past week. We know this past week against the Lions, it was a very nice matchup. So if we're looking at Allen Robinson, I know a lot of people are going to want us to take the Allen Robinson line here at 4.5 receptions. I think that could be potentially interesting. Like if we're looking up, obviously Allen Robinson has been atrocious so far this year. I mean, if we're going to be looking at Allen Robinson, this is a player that for 4.5 receptions, he has had that 1 week in 1 week only. If you're looking at the targets that he has had here, he's had 4 targets, 6 targets, 3 targets with Justin Fields under center. So maybe this line at 4.5 receptions is very good. Let me see what we have seen with Darnell Mooney. I know Mooney did get here with 50 receiving yards this past week with a couple deep balls. Yeah, so Darnell Mooney's had now 2 weeks with Justin Fields where he's hit this mark. He had 1 week where only had 9 receiving yards. So maybe we're going to move this Darnell Mooney under, and I hate to do this. I truly hate doing this. Y'all know I really liked Allen Robinson coming into the year, but let's move that from Darnell Mooney to Allen Robinson, as it looks like Justin Fields is preferring a little bit of the deep route action rather than working the boundaries with Allen Robinson. Now, if we're going to go on the case of the Las Vegas Raiders here, I think we're potentially going to go Josh Jacobs. I know Jacobs does have a tough matchup, but if we're assuming that these unders are going to hit here, we're essentially betting that you're going to have the Raiders winning this game by considerable amount. And if that's to happen, you'd imagine that Josh Jacobs has a lot of carries in this matchup. Now, if you're going to be looking at Jacobs so far this season, he's really only had 34 and 40 rushing yards. But keep in mind, week 1 against the Ravens, he was in and out of the lineup given the fact that he was dealing with a multitude of injuries. And in week 4 against the Chargers, he only had 40 rushing yards. But also this was a game that the Raiders trailed the majority of the time. So I think if we're betting that the Raiders are going to win here heavily, we're just going to go through. And so I'm saying I don't like this line of Josh Jacobs, just like what we said with our pass bet. I'm not choosing the Jacobs over here because we like this in a neutral situation. But we like this if our first scenario plays out. If our first scenario plays out where we actually get these unders hitting for these 3 players, then it's more likely than not that Josh Jacobs does become a bell cow running back. So here when we're going to be betting the 10x, I don't want to be betting that much just because we know it's such a low probability. You know what? We won so much goddamn money last week. Let's go $20 on it. $20 to win 200. Obviously, that's not a high probability bet, but that's going to be one that we just have to hit it 10% of the time. Now, our next bet will be coming from Cleveland and Los Angeles, possibly, where you're looking at it and, oh my gosh, this is a spot where they're pretty much begging you to take some overs here with the Cleveland Browns, where they have Baker Mayfield at 225 passing yards. I actually think we're going to fall for it. I think we are going to take some of these overs. I think if we're going to be assuming that you get Baker Mayfield to hit his over, Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be a smash here as well. And then you're also going to get that from, I really like Kareem Hunt with this line, 65.5 rushing and receiving yards. I know with Hunt, this is someone that didn't necessarily get a ton of usage in the receiving game this past week. He only had 2 receptions, but still with no Jarvis Landry here, I am going to assume that we get more targets out of this backfield for Kareem Hunt than not. I mean, if you're looking so far this season, he's had about, I believe, 350 total yards through 4 weeks. So he's averaging close to 90. I think this mark isn't necessarily that bad. And keep in mind, if we're predicting that Baker Mayfield is going to be extra productive here, more than the 225 passing yards, I think you get a similar thing over here for these players. Now, if we're going to be looking at picking a side on the Los Angeles Chargers, these are very aggressive lines for the Chargers. Like, honestly, I'm not even a massive fan of what we're going to be getting on this side of the bet. I do think we potentially have to go through and just take the over on one of these players here, however, because if we're going to be assuming that Baker Mayfield has to throw the ball consistently, then this will be a spot where the Los Angeles Chargers also are in a position where they have to go through and they have to put up points. So Mike Williams has hit 82 receiving yards, 91 receiving yards, 122, and then 11. So he's hit this mark 3 out of 4 times so far this year. I think we just go through and we bet the over on Mike Williams. Let me see what we've had from Keenan Allen. I know Allen hasn't been as productive with the overall receiving yardage. Keep in mind, it's a player that did start off the year very hot with over 2 games to start over 100 yards. Then he had 50, then he had 36. So honestly, I'm assuming that Mike Williams is going to be more of the yardage guy here in Los Angeles, with Keenan Allen being more of the possession wide receiver. So yeah, we're going to go through and make another bet here where we're just going all in. You know what? We're actually going to take the Kareem Hunt side out of this. We're just going to go over on Baker, over on Odell, and over on Mike Williams. I think this will be a spot where there's a clear path for this correlation. We're going to bet 30 to win 180 here. I really do like that bet, just knowing that there's a clear path for that to get there. And now we got a couple more games to look at. Hell yes, they add in. Oh my gosh, we're going to get to that Buffalo Bills and Kansas City Chiefs game in a second. Now, if we're going to be looking at Dallas and the New York Giants, I mean, here, I'm going to be staying away from this, frankly, because they only have one line, and that's Daniel Jones at 299.5 total yards. So it's very hard to get the correlation in here. Like, when they only have one line here, I think this is a spot where we can't really cheat the system. We can't really go through and try to build in the correlation with our tickets. So we're going to be staying away from that game. And now if we're going to be looking at this Arizona Cardinals matchup against the 49ers, they really have no 49ers lines out right now just because there's so much uncertainty with George Kittle. Obviously, they just had Trey Lance announced as the starter as well. So we're going to be avoiding these lines with the Arizona Cardinals, even though I think there are some intriguing bets like DeAndre Hopkins over 72.5 receiving yards. I just want to make sure we have our rule. We're only making the bets when we get the correlation in there. Now, if we're going to be looking at this Buffalo Bills and Kansas City Chiefs game, dear God, I think we have to go smash some overs here. No, I think we're going to smash the over on Emmanuel Sanders, over Josh Allen. We're going to go over Patrick Mahomes. And then here, Josh Gordon, 14.5 receiving yards. We're not taking it. I know a lot of people are going to be. However, I think that here instead, we can go through and we can just take the over on Travis Kelce. I know Kelce didn't get there this past week, but this is still someone that I think is going to be worked consistently over the middle of the field against the Buffalo Bills. I just think that this game could potentially be the highest scoring game of the week. And yeah, I think that this Emmanuel Sanders line at 51.5 receiving yards is pretty nice. I mean, if we're going to be pulling it up with what we've had from Emmanuel Sanders, I mean, this is someone that had 8 targets week 1, then he's had 6 targets every week since then. He's hit this mark of both of the last 2 weeks. He's hit this mark 3 out of, literally the only week that he did not get 51.5 receiving yards was week 2 against the Dolphins, where he got 48. He's right there. I think the over on Emmanuel Sanders is my favorite line of the week, probably. So yeah, let's go through and let's make this bet. And honestly, I'm going to be very confident with this one. It'll be a fun game. I want to root for it at the same time. We're going to bet 20 to win 200 here. Okay, so now let's get that in, and let's make one more bet. This will be on the Indianapolis Colts and the Baltimore Ravens if we see a line that we like. So this Sami Watkins, is Sami Watkins really this productive? Is he getting this kind of opportunity in this offense and I'm not necessarily paying attention to it? Sami Watkins, yeah, 96 receiving yards, 44, 68, 49. So he has hit this every single week so far, knowing that if Sami Watkins hits this over, then you're also going to have it more times than not where Latavius Murray is hitting his over at the same time. Sorry, not Latavius Murray, Lamar Jackson. So let's take Sami Watkins and the Lamar over here. And if this is going to happen, you'd imagine that you also get an over from the player that's been soaking up all of the targets in Indianapolis. Let me check out what Michael Pittman has done so far. 20.5 receiving yards. I'm sorry, not Michael Pittman. Paris Campbell. I think that the over there with Michael Pittman is almost a no-brainer. Paris Campbell, however, I mean, he has only hit this mark 2 out of the 3 weeks so far. We're just going to take the over on Pittman, where Pittman has been seeing a considerable amount of targets in this offense. If you're looking at Michael Pittman so far, this is someone that over the past 3 weeks has had, dear God, he's had 32 targets. He's averaging almost 11 targets a game. He has smashed this line every single week over the past 3. Yeah, so we're going to be taking this with, honestly, I kind of like this one a lot. We're going to go 25 on this as well. No idea how much we just bet, but this is the $1,000 bankroll challenge. Of course, we'll go through and we'll recap what we did this next week. And I hope that y'all enjoyed this. I hope y'all were following along with us through the first 3 weeks. 4 weeks now, because we've been very profitable. We showed that at the beginning of the live stream. Hopefully this continues to happen. Go use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. Support this channel when you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. You get a max deposit bonus. At the same time, you get daily additional entries to win a Fantasy Flock Network hat. And to go along with this, you support this channel more than you would ever believe. So thank you so much for everybody watching. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Subscribe, drop that like, and I will hopefully see y'all with, I think our next video on this channel will be the betting video tomorrow. Hopefully I see y'all then.